supposed to love me most in the world don't care about my mental illness. It's something that I've heard said a lot lately. I've also seen it on the internet forums. People talking about the fact that families just don't understand, don't get it, don't care. It's a complicated issue. Some of the reasons are your fault, some of the reasons are their fault. But we're going to try and find what that common ground is today, and we're going to explore how we get past that. That's on STP Shattered the podcast. Subscribe, like, and share.
Welcome to Shattered the podcast,
sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
a mother.
a family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
family. It's the most important structure. It's what we all want and desire. And you'll say some people don't, and that's fine. They don't. But think about it. Marriage equality, de facto relationships, living together. It's people trying to generate and build family community around themselves. Why do we do this? Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I can tell you that it's an inherent desire in the vast majority of us. We are social creatures. Now, what happens when you have a mental illness and all of a sudden that family structure, that place where you're supposed to feel safe, doesn't feel like that anymore? You have a mental illness, you're struggling, something has happened inside your brain. You might have suffered trauma. You might have lived with a condition your entire life, something that has no beginning, something that you've just always lived with. But yet when you start to talk about it, it feels like family and friends are pulling away. There is many, many reasons for this. Now, let's deal with the extremes. Yes, there are certain circumstances where family doesn't care. Maybe they have gotten to a point where it's too much for them and they've just tried to move on. They've decided it's healthier for themselves. Now, that's an extreme case, and that does happen. But let's talk about a person like myself. I didn't have many friends before I got a mental illness. My life was basically my family and my work. I didn't really do a lot of socializing. I had a couple of really close friends and a very close relationship with my family, although we lived all over Australia. So when I got a mental illness, when I started suffering the symptoms of complex PTSD, I didn't really have that much to lose as far as friendships go. I was in a place where I was very alone at that time. So friendships and losing friendships weren't really that important to me. My relationship with my wife, though, was everything. We knew something was wrong. I came home a different person. I knew it. She knew it. We all knew it. And I accidentally did something right from the start, which now in retrospect was the smartest thing I ever did, was I included my wife in all of my steps to recovery. She was in the vast majority of my psych appointments. She helped me monitor my medication. She was involved in discussions with my GP and my psychiatrist about the drugs that I was taking and the effects that they had, because I understood right from the beginning that my perception was wrong. What I perceived and what I saw and what I heard could often be clouded in this fog of mental illness. Now, I talk about at times I feel like I've got a cacophony of noise in my head, and I do. It feels like I'm in a room and I'm surrounded by people standing in a circle and they're all trying to speak to the person on the other side of the circle, and I'm in the middle. And I'm hearing these voices, these conversations. I'm hearing snippets. I'm hearing parts. I'm hearing insults. I'm hearing questions. My mind is just bombarded by this internal noise. And I can often miss entire conversations because somebody's talking to me and I'm responding because the person that's speaking to me outside of my head is just another one of those voices. And I'm kind of getting used to interacting with all of them. So I can look like I know exactly what's going on. But there was times when I would walk out of a psych session and I would say to my wife, I hated when this happened. And she said, that never happened. You've got the wrong end of the stick there. You completely misunderstood, or you didn't understand, or you didn't comprehend. So getting my wife involved covered a few hurdles. First and foremost, she could see that I was actively trying to get better. I was doing everything I could to get better. Now, I never, ever liked going to psych appointments. There was never in my life a time when I was like, I really need to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It was, I have to go. There is no choice. I either drown in this barrage of illness, mental illness, or I do something about it. So my wife could see that I was doing the things that I needed to do. I hate taking medication. It's the last thing in the world that I ever wanted to do. I always grew up proud of the fact that I didn't take medication. So all of a sudden being told that you have to live medicated was a struggle for me and a sacrifice. And it was a sacrifice that my wife saw I was very, very willing to make. So the first hurdle that she saw, first hindrance to communication, is that she understood exactly what was going on with me. She knew beyond a shadow of a doubt exactly where I was at any given time. And I gave her doctor's permission. I had to write letters giving them permission for them to speak to her on my behalf and to consider that when she's talking to her, she's talking to me. So nothing was hidden in my recovery. Another big hurdle that we overcame very, very quickly was the fact that when you have a mental illness, initially, you don't know how to talk about it. You don't know how to describe it. So if I come to you and say, I feel really, really sad, you can go, okay, I've been sad. I guess times two. Maybe that's what you're feeling. I pretty much get it. But a psychologist, a psychiatrist will find ways to help you talk about your mental illness in a way that is comprehensible. So my wife comes to me and says, how you doing? And I go, I'm all right. Do it all the time. I've learned that that's not good enough. She's asking, how are things going? Now, she's not saying we need to have a long talk about your mental illness because she knows that most of the time I'm not up for that. But how are you doing? Mate, I'm struggling a bit today. She'd be like, okay, are you safe? Because she doesn't know what I'm struggling with. Am I struggling with suicidal ideation, or am I just struggling with the fact that I feel really, really depressed? So I've got to delve into it a little bit more. We've developed a shorthand. Now, that shorthand is part of that language. For me, it's metaphors. I have mental pictures in my head of various things that I can think about with absolute clarity. So a psychiatrist tried to do some sort of hypnosis kind of stuff with me. And he said, where's your happy place? I couldn't find one. I could not think of a happy place because mental illness had colored all of my memories. So every nice place I'd been to, looking back, it was now distorted. And it was like a horrific dreamscape. So instead of looking back on a pleasant dream, I was looking back on a nightmare. And the only place that I could feel really safe in my head was this time when I was out the back of the surf at Manly Beach. It's down the road a little bit, freshwater beach. And I duck dived under the water, and it was a brilliant, clear day. I could see the sand beneath me, and I could see it stretching on into infinity. And it was so peaceful and so beautiful that I forgot that I was in the ocean. I didn't think about the sharks, which you always think about when you're in the surf industry. You have to. All I was just caught in the absolute beauty of this moment. And for some reason, my mental illness didn't discolor this memory. Don't know why. So I talk in metaphors. I talk about things like that. That was the last time I felt really peaceful that I can remember. And when I need to go somewhere in my head, a mindfulness place, that's where I go. But let's get back to talking about feeling sad. If I tell you I feel sad, you go, okay, you're sad. Get it. I was a teenager. I know what it feels like to be sad. But if I talk about the fact that I feel like I'm in a hole and somebody is slowly pouring dirt over the top of me and covering me, that's an image that people can grab onto. That's an image that people can see and go, okay, all right, how do we stop perhaps the sand or the dirt falling down? Is there something we can do with that? What is it that's making you feel like that? It gives you a tangible place to move on from. Now, if your friends and family don't have that tangible place to come from, it's like a blind man throwing darts in a crowded pub. You're just throwing darts anywhere. You don't know. Maybe it'll hit. Maybe it'll hit the dartboard. And that's what a person without a mental illness supporting a family member can feel like. Can feel like that. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm blind. I'm throwing things out anywhere. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it's going to fit. I don't know if it's going to poke somebody in the eye. I don't know. I just don't know. And that is probably the first and biggest reason why you feel like your family doesn't care is, first off, they don't understand. They can't understand because they don't have the language to understand. Now, I didn't go into my first psychologist appointment and say, "Doctor, I feel really sad. It's like I'm in a bottom of a well, and I feel like the well is getting thinner and thinner the deeper it goes down." The psychologist, the psychiatrist had to talk to me and get me to pull out this imagery. Okay, you feel like you've got a cloud around your head. Describe the cloud. Oh, I guess it's a dark cloud. Okay, what are we talking? Are we talking like a thunderstorm? Are we talking like a hurricane? What are we talking? That gives them and you a place to go on from, because feelings are not tangible. You can't quantify a feeling unless you describe that feeling. What makes you happy? Being by myself. Okay. What about being by yourself makes you happy? Well, I really enjoy being away from, I like doing things. You have to describe so that people can get a context. So that's miscommunication and misunderstanding. Second one is the fact that when you have a mental illness, often you are dealing with a deep depression or anxiety. And the safest thing to do when you are depressed or sad is to cover up and protect yourself. It's to withdraw. It's to make yourself look small. And we do that with our entire actions. Think about a young person that's suffering depression. What do they do? What's their inclination? They want to lock themselves in their room. They want it nice and dark. They just want to be left alone. That's a standard natural reaction. But when you've got a mental illness, it's the worst possible thing that you can do for many, many different reasons. But in today's context, it's bad because your family sees you pulling away. They've tried various things, Come out and have dinner with us. Come and watch this show. They might have come at exactly the wrong time. You're dealing with an existential crisis, and somebody says, "Do you want to go to the shops and get some ice cream?" And you're so consumed with your pain that getting an ice cream just seems anathema. It seems ridiculous. I want what? Why? Why would I want an ice cream? Often, it's the family. Just they're the darts that they're throwing out. They're just they don't know. They see you withdrawing, and the other side of that is that withdrawal. Think about a shy person. My wife is an introvert. I'm an extrovert. My wife will often be confused for being arrogant and aloof because she's quiet. She is self contained. She doesn't mind walking into a crowded room, standing in the corner, and eating a piece of cake or a cup of tea. She don't mind that. She'd prefer not to be in the room, but if she has to be, she's like, well, I'm here. What else do you want? And often that's the case. We went to a party a couple of weeks ago. I'm the one that suffers from a mental illness. You would think that the roles were reversed. I went out of my way to make sure that I spoke to everybody at the party, everybody that had come. I wasn't trying to make anybody feel special. I was just trying to make everyone at the party feel acknowledged, and that was important to me. My wife, she couldn't care less. She's like, they've showed up. Isn't that enough? Here I am. I said hi to them. If we need to talk about something, we will. But that reticence to talk can seem like rudeness, can seem abrupt, can feel sharp. And if you're in a family where most of the time you've been upbeat and happy and excited, when you're not, your withdrawal or people's reaction to that can look like they don't care. When in fact, they're just responding to how you're acting. I've been sitting in a room by myself for a week and nobody's come to see me because they're respecting your privacy. You're the one that's pulling away. They might not know or understand that you desperately just want somebody to come and sit in the room with you, but they can't know that because in your mental illness, you're not communicating. You're not telling them that that's what you need. And that's not your fault. It's not their fault. It's just a fact of life. We've talked about miscommunication. We've talked a bit about those thrown darts. Your family and friends will get to a point where they just run out of ideas. If you're not communicating and they've tried everything that they can to the best of their ability, because it takes a truly empathic person to notice that someone is suffering and then find a way to bridge that gap so that you can address it with them. It takes an incredibly special person to do that. Most of us don't do that. We see the way that somebody is acting and we respond in kind. They're withdrawing, they're trying to get away from me. If I chase them, I'm impinging on their space. So I left them to their own devices. They've just run out of ideas. They don't know what to try. They don't know what works. They don't know what doesn't work. And this will often be put in the case of, they don't want to make things worse. Well, that's the overarching human condition. Nobody wants to make anything worse for anybody unless you're a psychopath or a something path. For the most part, we just want people to be and do what they want. We want good things for people. We want people to be who they want to be. And when somebody's behavior changes, dramatically, it can be hard to know what to do. I've reached out, I've tried. Yeah, and possibly they have. And if you're a person with a mental illness, you're thinking, well, my family never tries. Okay, all right, let's examine that. Have they repeatedly asked you to do something? Maybe it's something you don't even want to do. Have they come into your space at times where it's been really frustrating for you and you've perhaps snapped at them? I've done this all the time. My kids will come to me while I'm in a mental marathon and they'll ask me something and I'll react and it will look angry. What? I'm not angry at them. I'm not really even angry. I'm just interrupted and that's been my response. What? I've had to go to them and say, "Look, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's not you. I'm not. This is not directed at you. I'm sorry. I'm just dealing with something at the moment. I'm so sorry. That's not how I meant to talk to you." For a person with a mental illness, that is hard to do. But if you want to get better, you need to be humble. You need to realize that you make mistakes as well. Can't just say, "Oh, I've got a mental illness, so I can treat people any way that I want." No, no. You've got a mental illness and you've got to treat people the best that you possibly can. Now, that best at times may fall really, really short of satisfactory, but at least you're giving it your best. So the lack of ideas feeds into your reactions, how you've reacted at various times and places to things that people have done and said. They've just learned that you seem to be happier if I leave you alone. I don't want to go in there and make you upset because I don't know what that's going to lead to. I have a mental illness. I have a podcast that I talk about mental illness. I go into schools and workplaces and academies and I talk about what it's like to live with mental illness. My daughter has a mental illness. There are times where I don't know what to do or say. And quantitatively, you could call me something of an expert in this subject. And I still, at times, don't know what to say. Am I going to say something that's going to send her into a spiral of depression that may lead to another suicide attempt? And you question yourself and you double question yourself and you triple question yourself. Oh, I said this thing. Is this going to hurt her? I asked her if she was okay, but I didn't ask the right way. You're terrified of making things worse. And what do we do when we're scared of something? We avoid it. And I'm guilty of that. As a family member, as a father, I would do anything for my kids. And my kids know that. Whatever's in my power, any way that I can protect them, I will. They ask me for anything and it's in my power to give it, I will. But there are times where I don't know what to do for her. And I'm frightened of going in and saying something that's going to trigger her or make things worse. That leads into the fear. People are afraid for you, particularly if the word suicide has come up. In recent times, everything seems to be linked to suicide. I'm LGBT, so I'm at higher risk of suicide. I'm a younger white male, so I'm at a higher risk of suicide. The problem with that is that people outside of mental illness naturally assume that everything will lead to potential suicide, and they don't want to be the ones that say the thing that tips you over the edge. I was watching a show the other day, and it was dealing with some fairly complicated issues, but a son came to his mother and he was older, maybe in his 30s, and he'd just lost another job. And he comes to his mum and he says, "Can you do anything for me? Can you get me a job at your school? I'll work in the cafeteria, or I'll clean the floors." And the mother turns to him and says, "No, I can't do that anymore. I could have done it when you were younger, but there's got to be a time where you start to take responsibility for your own life." And the actor does a great job. In that instant, something just clicks. You've got to take responsibility for your own life. And then he went into the classic, uh, it's not a stereotype, it's a real thing. When somebody has chosen to take their own life, they can seem to be at peace because the decision's been made. There are no unponderables. They know that their pain is about to end. So they become very calm, and that's what he did. He knew that his mother was disappointed. He saw his dad, he hugged him, told him he loved him, barely glanced at his mum. "See you later." Went out, got in the car, and killed himself. You watch an image like that, and it happens a lot less than we think, that somebody will say the one thing that sends somebody over the edge, but that's the fear. And while I can appreciate the pathos, the skill of the actors, the writers, that sort of thing in that situation, it's not a great stereotype because it puts in people's minds who don't have a mental illness that they could be the one that kills their kid. Because as soon as I saw this, the first words that came out of my mouth to my wife were, "Oop, she just killed him." Probably because it was poorly written and you could just tell that that was what was gonna happen. But that's the stereotype, and it's fear. Pure, simple fear. I'm afraid that I will be the one that kills you. As I said, rarely is it the case where one person says one thing and somebody goes out and takes their own life. It's more than just one conversation. It's a lifetime of pain. And it might not have been their whole life, but they feel like it is. The last one, and probably the hardest one to hear, is that your family could be angry with you, angry at the situation. When my daughter tried to take her own life, I was mad at her. I was angry because didn't she know that I would do anything for her? Did she not know that all of my hopes and my dreams for her life will now go unfulfilled? Does she not know that all of the time, energy, love, patience that I've put into her have been a waste of time? Now, these were the thoughts that were running through my head, and I was getting angrier and angrier about it. And there's been at times during her recovery where something will come up, and it's just like, why are you not doing this simple thing that will help you? It's hard because you know somebody's struggling, you know someone is suffering, but you're mad at them. It's hard to admit. It's hard to talk about. So where do we go from here? What's our takeaway from today? Well, let's talk to the person with a mental illness first. You might be a large part of the reason why your family doesn't seem to care. It's not because you've done anything wrong or you've intentionally damaged relationships. It's just they don't understand you. And you haven't had the energy, ability, or language to describe how you feel to them. You need to find ways to allow your family to communicate with you in ways that are safe for you. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It's hard. It's hard because each and every time you talk about the mental illness, you've got to bare your soul. You have to give away a part of yourself and you're exposed. And that information could be used to harm you. But if you don't, that loneliness will continue and it will get worse and it will get worse. You need to find a way to communicate effectively and well with your family members. Now, I'm not talking about writing speeches for each other. As I talked about, my wife and I have developed a shorthand where she can ask me intense personal questions in a way that is safe. And we have this one thing where I will just say, mate, I can't talk about this anymore. And it's not because I don't want to. It's not because I don't value her input. It's just I've gotten to a point where my mental illness is starting to kick in and the symptoms are starting to get louder and louder. And I need to stop talking about this. How you doing? No, I'm fine, mate. I'm good. I'm having a good day. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Let's move on. Mate, how are you doing? Struggling a bit today, mate. Is there anything I can do? No, no. Okay. She walks away because she knows that I'm being honest. And I know that if I said I could really use X, Y, or Z, she would make it happen. To the person or the family member of somebody that you love that has a mental illness, I want to say this. I would rather listen to a person's sad sob story than listen to their eulogy. We can be dealing in life or death. There are times where your person with mental illness will make it impossible for you to communicate with them. And that's okay. It's hard. It's going to hurt, but it's okay. As long as you in yourself can be confident that you did everything you could. Talk to your person. I know I don't understand. I know I don't get it. Help me to please understand. Can I come to a doctor visit with you? Can I please learn what I need to do? If you've got a teenager, it's going to seem impossible. Me, I'm a talker. Got a problem? Let's talk it out. My mental illness is the same. I've gotten much better since I've just started being open about who I am and what I have than when I kept it secret. I had a job once where my job performance went downhill. And my boss said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I've just started this new medication." And she's like, "You didn't tell me you were on medication in the interview. If I knew that, I would never have hired you." You want to keep things quiet about your mental illness. It's safer to do that. Now, I was exposed on that day, dreadfully exposed. I was telling her something that was a secret that even people in my family didn't know. And it was thrown back in my face. Now, in that situation, I needed to just get to a point where I said, she is not important and I don't care. But it's hard. I've got family that love me and I've tried to open up to them at different times and I've been shot down. And it's hurt. But I've had to learn that some people will understand. Some people never will. Here's a true fact. I know that my parents have always struggled with the fact that I have a mental illness. And they may listen to this. And if they do, I love you. Don't blame me. Don't have any negative thoughts towards you whatsoever. And they never really engaged with me about my mental illness until my brother came home from war with PTSD. They watched him struggle and suffer. And the way that he got mental illness is a way that people understand. I went to war, people shot at me. Wow, why don't you have PTSD? Me, I got it from work as a carer. People didn't see the 6 in the morning times where I would walk into work and there was a woman that we had to walk past her bedroom. And every time she heard me come in, I would walk through the door and I would hear, "You're an effing C. You FC. You effing C. You FC." And it was constant. And I had to, when I walked from the office upstairs, I had to walk as quietly as I could. Otherwise, this barrage of effing C's would follow me up the stairs. Now, people didn't see that. They saw me caring for people. They saw me being gentle and tender with people. They didn't see the punches. The kid that you have to wake up gently by touching on the shoulder, but then you have to step back so that he doesn't punch you in the face. People didn't see that. So when I said I've now got PTSD, people were like, "From what? Why have you got what? This doesn't make any sense." When my brother came home from war and my parents started researching and looking into the symptoms that he was going through, they could look at it and they said, "Oh, okay, we understand now why Mark acted the way he did. We understand now why my grandfather, who was a war veteran, suffered from undiagnosed PTSD, why he tried to self-medicate and at times was a very bitter, angry alcoholic. We understand that now." I had to, in my own mind, realize, discuss, analyze, whatever, convince myself that it wasn't my parents being unloving or unkind. They just didn't understand. And how could they? You know, we live in different cities. We never sat down and talked about this stuff. But they were always willing if I ever asked for anything. I was like, "Yes, no problem." As a person with a mental illness, I have to realize that it was me that pulled away from them. I got quiet. I didn't talk to them. How could they know that something was as wrong as it was? Unfortunately, the week that I tried to take my life was also the week that my grandfather died. And somebody asked me a few weeks ago why family didn't surround me at that time. And I have to explain to people that my mother and my father were dealing with the death of their dad. They were in deep grief. This is a man who was older, but he seemed healthy. He seemed vital. My grandmother was in a nursing home. My nan, we were all expecting her to go at any time. We didn't know that she was not going to leave before Pop did. So the week that I tried to take my life, that grief certainly had a big part in it. And it's only been recently that we've started to talk about that week and how there was too much going on. It was just overwhelming. I have to take responsibility for the fact that I made choices in that time. It's the hardest thing you can do as a person with mental illness is take responsibility for your own actions. It's to say, I did the wrong thing. I got mad at the wrong person. I got mad in the wrong way because you want to blame your mental illness because you know it's not you. This is not the way I would normally act. You have to understand that. If you feel alone, you may be physically all alone. And I understand that. Honestly, I don't know what to tell you because your life, your situation is yours. For me, I hated going to CrossFit. I think it's a cult. And my CrossFit teacher, she's really interesting. She would shout at everybody, "Come on, do better, more push-ups, you can do it." When she shouted at me, it had the opposite reaction. She would say, "Run faster." I would run slower. Something in me. Just don't tell me what to do. She came over and said, "You don't like being shouted at like that, do you?" No, no. I will walk away if somebody's shouting at me in that CrossFit situation. "Come on, Mark, get it done." Like, no. Well, it was effective and she was brilliant at this. And I didn't realize she was doing it till much later. She would actually, I'd be on the ground doing push ups. She'd get on the ground, lie on her stomach beside me and go, "Come on, mate, two more. You can do two more." She learned that I respond in ways that were different to the rest of the class. And in fact, my response was the opposite. Now, that's often been the case with my mental illness. People will say and do something expecting a certain result, but there's something in me, in my makeup, in my mental illness that won't let me do that. The best psychs that I've had have been the ones that try and walk me through what I need to do, not tell me. At times, they'll say, "Hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z." But at other times, it's like, "Okay, Mark, let's come to a realization together of what we need to do." So, what's this got to do at all with being by yourself? You need to find outlets. I hated CrossFit, hated every second of it, but I was outside, I was in fresh air, and I had to talk to people. I couldn't not talk to people because people were always around you. People were holding your feet while you were doing sit ups. People were, doing all sorts of stuff. And as much as I loathed it, mentally, it was a very, very healthy time for me. So you're alone. You don't have family around you. Got a couple of options. You need to think about whether that's the best situation for you. Are you living distant from other people? Maybe you need to move closer to family. Maybe. Maybe you need to open up lines of communication with your family. Maybe they are close, but they're at the point where they're tired, they're angry, they don't know what to say and do. Find ways to have conversations with them. My family, my in laws, I love them more and more the more I realize how much they tolerate my idiosyncratic behavior. They understand that at a family event, at times it gets too much for me and I have to bolt. I'm just at a point where I am exhausted. I'm starting to lose control over my reactions. Something has happened, something minor, something nothing, but I can feel my anger, my angst rising up for no reason. Nobody's done anything. But I'm just at a point where I know that if I persist in this, my mental health is going to start kicking in and I'm going to respond badly, which has happened. I'm embarrassed to say. Maybe you need to move closer to family. Maybe you need to start re-engaging with people, but on your terms. You can say to your friend, it is really hard for me to get together, but I'd really like to. Even if it's just for a cup of coffee once a week or once a fortnight, once something. Maybe you feel even disconnected from that opportunity. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your psychologist, your psychiatrist. Tell them that you're feeling like you need to socialize and you don't know how to. There's a verse in the Bible. There's going to be a lot of people listening that aren't going to like me quoting the Bible, but it's a verse that I love. And it says, you have not because you ask not. You don't have things because you don't ask for them. And that's a thing that humans do. We will often not ask for something and then wonder why we don't have it. I don't have friendships. Well, have you reached out to somebody and said, I would like to form a friendship with you? Can you please help me? I'd like to reestablish a relationship. Can you please help me? Just know that if you're in the middle of a crisis, if you're struggling, be patient because that crisis, that storm will subside. Maybe not back to normal, but it will not be as bad as it feels right now if you just be patient. Stay another day. Don't sit in your misery. If you poo in your pants, don't sit there in the mess. Clean it up. Action is better than no action. If things are at a point where you don't know what to do, that's when you need to keep going. That's when you need to do what the opposite of what your body's saying or your mind is saying. I'm lonely. I'm cut off. I have to do something. If I just sit here and wallow in it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. But if I do something, anything, I'm moving in a direction. A ship can't change direction if it's sitting still. You've got to be moving to make a change. And that move might be small, might be tiny, might be saying hello to a neighbor as you walk past them in the hallway. Something as simple as that. Responding to a phone call from someone. I hate mobile phones. I have one with me all the time. I hate it because I don't like the idea that somebody can just decide on a whim that they need to talk to me and could go, beep. I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to do that." There are times when I have to just say, you know what? It would be good for me if I take this phone call. This might be a good conversation, just even if it's just to shoot the breeze. If you are feeling alone, if you're feeling like you're by yourself, if you're feeling like you are completely cut off, the doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists around you, if they're good ones, will help you with that. Reach out, call Lifeline, call Beyond Blue, call whoever the psychiatric helpline is in your country, your city. Just give them a call. You can call them and just say, I feel lonely. Sometimes just having a person saying, man, that sucks. I'm so sorry that you feel lonely. These people are trained. They'll try to give you ideas. They'll try to give you prompts. Nobody has to be alone in this world. There is someone out there that wants the best for you. Find that person. Going to leave it there for this week. We're going to continue this on Wednesday when we do marriage and mental illness. I'm going to ask Mary about this subject, going to get her thoughts. on what it feels like when a family member tells you that you don't support them or love them. It's going to be a good one. I'm keen to get her thoughts on this. Have a great week, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Thank you for listening to Shattered, the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.